Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk, a rare Monday episode of Plain Talk, but we kind of felt obligated. Now, Chad and I hadn't planned on having a show today because he's traveling, but we ended up putting one together because so much happened at that NDGOP state convention, and then also, we even had some additional potential news this morning about a fourth candidate joining the Republican House primary. Just a lot going on, so we felt, you know what, let's record an episode, let's talk it out, because there's a lot to talk about. Chad, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I can just imagine the listeners are like, how can we process all this information without Rob and Chad telling us how to think or what we...
You joke, but there were people coming up to me at the Republican convention talking about how much they appreciate this show. And
really?
How much they appreciate us talking it through. I think everybody likes that. I mean, sometimes things happen and you're not sure how to feel about them, and you like listening to other people talk about them and talking to other people. That's how I am.
Well, I've heard from other people that they appreciate that we actually talk about North Dakota stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are talking about national stuff. And we are so important, Rob, that we are now in a political advertisement. I noticed your name and picture was used. It's only my voice that's used in the new Tammy Miller ad.
Yeah. Well, sorry about that. And maybe because I always forget to introduce you. Maybe that's...
Maybe it's because the show is named after you, but I mean, or your negatives are higher with Republican primary voters than mine.
Be. Well, I did also have a cameo in one of the campaign videos at the convention. Steve Nagel, who was running for national committeeman and won, beat longtime Republican Shane Gettle. He had an ad promoting his campaign, as the candidates do. They play a video presentation for the delegates. And it was going along, and it had like the narrator, and the narrator was like, Steve Nagel's gonna fight fake news, and they pop up Rachel Maddow, and then they pop up me, which was kind of hilarious.
It's some of the best company you've ever been associated with, Rob.
I feel like I should get a Rachel Maddow size paycheck. I think that would be fantastic.
And just do one show a week.
Cash. Yeah, why not? I don't care what they. Anyway, there were a lot of people who were coming up saying they appreciate the columns, they appreciate the podcast. I think they like what we're doing, they like what I'm doing. Maybe they weren't the majority in that room in Fargo in the NDGOP convention hall, but I don't think that convention hall was representative of the North Dakota Republican Party. And that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about, I think, this entire show. The Democrats also held their convention, and they endorsed their candidates. Merrill Pepcorn got a running mate. Former party chair Patrick Hart is going to be running in that slot, and that's all good. And we're going to be talking about those candidates a lot. And I mean this as no slight at all to the Democrats. It was just there was so much happening at the Republican Party. I couldn't get over to the Democratic convention as much as I wanted to.
Rob, before we leave the Democrat convention, though, I will tell you, I was over there for several hours on Saturday. The energy was fantastic over there. It felt different than Minot 2 years ago. Like the optimism was higher. The organization was stronger. I will tell you, their keynoter, Denver Ringelman, a former Republican member of Congress, not that long ago, 4 years ago, was fantastic about having to push back.
He was actually defeated by the current chair of the House Freedom Caucus, Bob Good, who, by the way, endorsed Rick Becker in his campaign.
And by the way, was primary challenge because he supported same-sex marriage, marriage equality, and was pro-vaccine.
Yeah.
That's why he lost his election. Anyway, I would encourage, once that speech comes up, to really encourage listeners to check it out, because it's really this cool sort of nonpartisan. My favorite line is he said, "I'm a pro-reality partisan."
He
Rob, I think that describes you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the thing that drives me about Trumpism. And sometimes it's not even Trump's policies. I mean, he promotes a lot of things that I'm not necessarily against. It's just I have a hard time being part of a political movement that's organized around a lie. He didn't win, or lots of lies. He didn't win in 2020. You know, he was a factor. Anyway, we're getting way off topic.
Yep.
Our topic is the Republican convention primarily. And there was so much that happened there. And even more so, I think the first thing we got to talk about is the House race, which was contentious. You saw Alex Balazs emerge, I think, as a real factor in this race. He came away from the convention with the endorsement. You saw he was neck and neck with Julie Fedorchak, but also there were games being played. Rick Becker, I published it during the convention, but he was sending out a text message to his supporters saying, spoil your ballots, don't vote for, and also saying don't vote for Balazs because he sees Balazs as a threat. So that dynamic is very interesting. And I could tell you Sunday driving back and having, you know, people calling me and having phone conversations, you know, my take was that was a bad convention for Rick Becker. Alex Balazs, I think, is a threat to him on his right flank. You know, Julie Fedorchak, I think it was a neutral convention. She didn't win the endorsement, but I think a lot of people can look at that convention and say that's not, how much is that endorsement worth? And Rick Becker comes out of it. He made a lot of people mad where, you know, he got outed trying to, you know, telling people to spoil their ballots. But then we come to Monday and we learn, you know, talk radio host Joe Heitkamp saying, Cara Mund's getting into the House race. Now, Cara Mund has not returned my inquiries. So I don't know, you know, what's for certain. I mean, Heitkamp is saying absolutely certain. He was sure, you know, very connected to her campaign in 2022 when she ran as an independent. So I don't know. The deadline to be on the primary ballot, you have to file 300 signatures. I think it's like a percentage of that party's candidate, what they got in the last election, but a maximum of 300. So basically it's 300 signatures. She's got to file those by 4 p.m. today. So I guess we'll find out, you know, maybe by the time people listen to this podcast, we'll already know, but that's a very interesting development as well.
So Rob, I think, you know, you saying Becker's the loser of this convention. I agree with that. You know, I sort of go back and forth on Fedorchak coming out of this thing. I mean, a week ago thought Fedorchak was going to win this convention hands down because this Balazs gentleman.
It's Balazs.
Yeah, Balazs. Nobody had heard of him. And then, you know, you broke the story about his ad. I've had some conversations with national consultants who are like, yeah, I know the consultants who are working with this guy and they're legit. They're real. Yeah. I mean, this is a real campaign.
One of them, I actually had a conversation with one of them this morning, a gentleman by the name of Matt Solomon, who ran for Congress in Colorado not that long ago. Last cycle? I don't know. But anyway, he's doing consulting work now and he's working on the Balazs campaign.
Yeah, and so I think, you know, maybe in the moment Fedorchak came out neutral, but if you go back a week ago, this is not a result that was a neutral result for her. But I would say the other flip side of that is she did overperform other normie Republicans at the convention. I mean, you mentioned Shane Gatto losing. Kirsten Baszler lost by a 2.5 to 1 margin. I would also say that this convention women candidates did not do well when facing all the delegates. When you think about Fedorchak and Baszler,
I have a hard time looking at someone like Baszler, and let's be honest, Baszler has some baggage, right. And she's been there a while, and I'm completely open to the idea that you know, and I'm open to the idea that anybody can be challenged. Nobody has a right to any of these seats. There's a process for a reason. You know, anybody can be made to work for it. But the choice at the convention was between her and Jim Bartlett, who's promising to bring the 10 Commandments back into school, who had, you know, two people who were not credible people give his endorsing speeches, one of whom is a, you know, very, very, you know, Trumpy activist by the name of Charles Tuttle, who, by the way, couldn't even be found for the seconding speech. I mean, it was just bizarre. But then he runs away with it. And I have a hard time believing that a convention that can make that choice is a convention that is representative of even Republican primary voters.
Yeah, I would say, you know, a couple things. It's my understanding that Charles Tuttle, it's from your column, that Charles Tuttle called public schools evil multiple times. Over and over again. North Dakotans don't think public schools are evil.
No.
But in terms of Mr. Bartlett, I mean, he wants to bring back the 10 Commandments. I also saw some of the literature that was out there, man. But he's also stated that he wants to, quote, unhook local school districts from state and federal funding. Plus, I believe he supports the elimination of property taxes. So is he looking to have an all-volunteer public education system? I mean, these are not like real conversations. Yeah. Around like public education.
I could understand being concerned about the amount of federal dollars that are in a state budget, given how often the federal government sometimes uses those dollars to manipulate local policies. I get that. That's a defensible position. But you're not even for state dollars. And oh, by the way, that's not even constitutional. The legislature is obligated per the state constitution to provide those dollars. So how are you going to disconnect something that the state constitution says the legislature has to do?
But I also think, you're saying that you don't think this represents Republicans in the state of North Dakota.
Not a majority. Not a majority. Yeah.
Rob, the reality is both political parties are ran by the people who show up at their conventions. That is the governing board of the state party. Republicans in North Dakota are what they did this weekend. You can't just sort of, splice it out and saying, normal Republicans, whatever. But they are the governing body who made this choice to nominate this guy whose nominators think public schools are evil. Yeah. I don't think Republican legislators think public schools are evil.
No. So I don't want it to make it sound, when I make that point, that room wasn't representative. That's not me defending what happened or trying to brush it off or sweep it under the rug. What happened was an embarrassment to the party. It's embarrassment to every elected official. Now, a lot of them aren't going to talk about it that way because they're afraid of their base. They don't want to invite problems. But, I think when we get to the June primary, again, Rick Becker almost wins in 22 against John Hoeven at the convention and then, gets decimated on the general election ballot. There is a disconnect between the Republicans who show up for that process, for the convention process, and the larger Republican electorate that shows up in June. There just is. Now, I'm not defending it, but that's a reality.
But when you come out of this weekend and Kelly Armstrong gets endorsed next to Mr. Bartlett, gets endorsed next to Balazs, did they stand up on stage? Was John Gottfried and Tom Beadle up there holding hands?
There was never a, where all the candidates get together and like raise their hands in the air, like for that photo. That never happened at this convention. But
doesn't it, and I'm interested, how was the response to Congressman Armstrong in that room? Was it overwhelmingly positive?
Yeah, I didn't hear any. There was no signs that it was negative. He got good cheers and stuff. And also remember Armstrong earlier. So the convention started out with a almost 3-hour rules food fight over seating District 37 delegates. And I wrote a lot about this leading up to the convention. Ultimately, the District 37 delegates were seated. And I think one reason why they were seated is because during that debate, Kelly Armstrong, gubernatorial candidate, took the political risk of going on the floor and basically saying, we need to seat these delegates. This is, and I don't, because I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was speaking in favor of the District 37. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was speaking in favor of seating the delegates. But he made the point, like, listen, I need votes from both sides of this debate. So this is a risk of me saying this, but we should seat them. And then the vote was ended up being very strongly in favor of seating the delegates. So,
Rob, you and I texted a little bit about that. Kelly can't help himself. He wants to fix a wrong, right? He jumps into it even when people are probably telling him not to. But I think that whole District 37 thing shows a sort of silly this process became.
Right.
So basically there are hundreds of delegates that voted to overturn Sandy Sanford's decision to seat the delegates, and then voted later on, 3-4 hours later, to seat the delegates. So basically what you had
basically
is,
the first vote was to have the debate. And then during the debate...
Rob, you ended up in the exact same spot 4 hours later. Maybe I'm for efficiency, but that seems sort of dumb.
It was very dumb. Don't get me wrong. I'm, again, not defending it. But just saying, that the first vote was to have the debate, and then the second. By the way, one of the interesting things during the debate is that the party had commissioned a legal opinion from the Vogel law firm that reviewed District 37's process in selecting their delegates and found that it was done in accordance with the rules and the laws. That memo wasn't distributed to delegates, even though the party had it. I ended up publishing it the night before on Thursday night before the convention. But the party didn't, even though they had sent out like the video of the credentialing committee meetings and everything, they didn't send out that memo. And then when people who were in favor of seating District 37 tried to bring the memo up, they got voted down.
So the party paid for this memo to be done by a very, very good law firm.
Yeah.
Cheap law firm. And then they couldn't.
I was joking a little bit with Senate Majority Leader David Hogue afterwards. He was like, I wanted to get up and say port of order. Like, Vogel's the best law firm in the state. Because somebody said that on the floor. Like, we have a legal opinion from the best law firm in the state. And Hogue, who, by the way, if you don't know, is an attorney with the Pringle and Herrickson law firm in Minot, wanted to stay. He was joking, but he wanted to say, like, point of order. They're not the best.
I want to take a roll call vote. Let's spend another 4 hours on the best law firm in North Dakota.
Yeah, it was. I think all of that speaks to, what is the value of that endorsement? Because again, we're going to have Alex Balazs on the show on Wednesday, and I don't want to be mean to this guy because I think he's sincere. Like, having met him, having seen everything, I think he's sincere. Even whatever I may think of his policies or his whatever else, I think he is a sincere person who got in this reason running a legitimate campaign. Like, he's not trying to play a game. He's not trying to do anything other than, I'm just a guy. I want to run for Congress and I'm engaging in the process. And good on him. Everybody has that right. But that was another him beating Julie Fedorchak. Nobody knows anything about him at this point. And we're gonna learn some things. But them selecting him over Fedorchak, again, just speaks to what is this convention doing. Julie Fedorchak has a decades-long track record in both in public service, much of it in elected office. How do you choose somebody you know nothing about other than maybe a couple of campaign ads over her? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that these endorsements, I don't know what they matter, really.
Yeah. So do you sense that both people from the Fedorchak, clearly people in the Fedorchak campaign and Julie herself were very frustrated by Rick Becker? Do you feel like Balazs and his team were also frustrated? And do you think the delegates at large were just frustrated with the games that Becker was playing? I mean, he really did just mess around with this process with these spoiled ballots when he made the choice 2 years ago to run as an independent and remove himself from this process. And then he just messed with things.
So this is the thing. So when I wrote about Becker sending out the text message to delegates basically he's sending this out on Saturday ahead of when the House vote was going to happen. And he sends it out, and Becker sends out this text message, and he says, I'm suggesting to write Becker on the U.S. House ballot. It will spoil the ballot, but it will send a message. Now, that's ultimately why Fedorchak pulled out, because so many people were spoiling their ballots. They couldn't get to a majority. Everybody was sick and tired of it. And Fedorchak went up and just withdrew and said, I'm going to move on to June. You were not going to do this anymore. And then, had some sharp words for Becker. I don't know what sort of I think paraphrasing, she said essentially, I don't know what sort of a leader would ask people to spoil their ballots. Right. And then also, by the way, Balazs, I'm told he was thinking about doing the same thing, withdrawing, and says that Fedorchak beat him. Maybe that's
it sounded like he was thinking about doing that after the first ballot, right? Yeah. Like when Fedorchak got more votes, because Balazs got 3 or 4 more votes than her the second ballot.
I think it was 6.
Yeah, but I was tracking your votes, which I appreciated, and it looked like he was well on his way to hitting that 50% mark, and then District 47 came in, and it was like, boom, he right below it.
Yeah, so I think, they were like, and by the way, people left. Fedorchak supporters left, so some Fedorchak voters had stayed in the room. She would have won on that second ballot, I think, and would have been over 50%, but whatever. I mean, I think at that point, Julie, like, everyone was tired, and I think she's just saying, we're not going to do this. Alex can have this. I'll go, I'll campaign to the June primary. She was very complimentary to Alex, by the way. And you asked, how does Alex feel about Becker? So when I got that text message, I got a comment from the Balazs campaign, and this is what he said. Becker and party insiders are once again playing the grassroots as fools. We are disappointed in this divisiveness. Alex is not a career politician and doesn't play these insider games. He is on the stage because too many career politicians and party elites pull stunts like this to desperately hold on to power. We are the party of voter integrity, the party that reveres our sacred vote, the patriotic party that holds dear the blood spilled and sacrifices made in the name of democracy. We have faith this political ploy to disenfranchise the conservatives in the party will fail and delegates will fully participate in the future of the party in our country. That was before any of the votes have been held. So
what I'm hearing here is Becker's whole messaging of being an outsider and the party leaders and career politicians sounds like Balazs might be throwing that right back at Mr. Becker.
And has more standing, I guess, to paint himself as an outsider, because he literally is. I'll give it to you. He's an outsider. Like, he's never, as far as I don't think he's ever held elected office before. Also, the fact that I have been writing about politics in North Dakota for more than 2 decades, and I had never heard of him before about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
So, Rob, all these people who we're critical of, who say, I'm not a politician, whatever, and we're like, come on, you're a politician.
No, he's
credibly do it now.
He's legitimately not a politician. And by the way, I mean, I also don't think it's so bad to be in elected office. I really like that I can look at somebody like a Meryl Pepcorn or a Julie Fedorchak or what have you, and they have governing track records. And I can look like, well, how did they vote on this issue? What did they do in this situation? I feel like that's important, as opposed to somebody who wanders in out of the wilderness and I don't know what they're going to do. Or even just somebody who's in business but has never governed. I don't know. I know it's unfashionable to say, but I still like it when people have some experience in elected office.
So, Rob, sort of watching the convention from the outside, it seemed like the District 37 vote was the first litmus test. And then the second litmus test of how this was going to go was that RNC committee vote that you referenced earlier between Dr. Steve Nagel, who, by the way, Rob, you had one of the best lines. He's the poster child for why chiropractors shouldn't be called doctors or something along those lines.
I did get some messages from other chiropractors about that, including one. At least Alicia Mitzcog messaged me, who, by the way, works as a chiropractor, and she says, you know, we try to distance ourselves from chiropractors who promote. I mean, that is a problem in the chiropractic industry.
Right.
Is there are a lot of chiropractors that promote, particularly like anti-vaccine, some very dubious health advice that I would argue is probably far beyond the scope of their professional capabilities, which is basically cracking backs. This sounds like I'm being really mean to chiropractors, but there are a lot of chiropractors that offer medical advice and use the authority of that doctor that is far beyond their actual expertise.
And let me just say, I've gone to some chiropractors who've been very helpful to this.
Chiropractors, there's nothing wrong with chiropractors, but you don't need to listen to your chiropractor on vaccines.
Yes. But I think the interesting thing there is Dr. Nagel, showing some respect, beat Shane Gettle, who is a long time sort of party insider. And I actually, leading up to the vote, I joked to some people that Shane Gettle is literally the most conservative person I've ever met in real life. Because it's not just like he's politically conservative, but he's like the way he talks is conservative. I mean, he's very conservative religious. I mean, this guy is, you know, conservative to his core. And they decided he wasn't conservative enough, or he wasn't crazy enough. Well,
because he's not on radio and he's not on social media throwing bombs and everything. Like he's conservative. When you say conservative, even like in his personality, he is reserved and he is very thoughtful, and he doesn't speak without a lot of consideration, and so he speaks very slowly. And he doesn't he's conservative in just about every way you can be conservative.
Right.
And he,
he's not Lori Hintz.
And by the way, Lori Hintz gave one of the endorsing speeches for Steve Nagel. So against, you know, I mean, like if you don't understand how this works, Gettle and Hintz are North Dakota's basically two representatives on the Republican National Committee, which is the national governing body of the Republican Party. You hear people talk about the RNC. That's what they're talking about. And so they served together and they would travel together to Republican events and everything. I mean, that was cold-blooded. And whatever, politics ain't beanbag. That stuff happens sometimes. But I I mean, you look at Shane Gettle and you look at everything he's done for the party, and it's like, you're going to push people like that. I mean, Shane Gettle in a lot of ways is kind of a plumber. Like, he's in the background, like, working on the rules and doing a lot of the stuff that makes the party function. You keep pushing people like that out, it's not going to function.
Right. He was the party treasurer before he got this job. And it's really interesting to think. I mean, thinking about those three leaders in the party now, it's Chairwoman Sanford, Lori Hintz, and Steve Nagel. Sanford is by far the most common sense of the three of them, I think. Maybe not by far, but the least conspiracy theorist of the three. That's crazy.
It was very evident, to me at least, as an observer. You know, Sanford was elected by this populist wing. She is responsible for elevating a lot of them, you know, appointing a lot of the sort of populist crowd into various positions within the party committees or what have you. In fact, the credentialing committee was appointed by her. And so when you look at some of the people that were on there, Mike Blessum, who was one of the people at the convention, he's from District 5 in Minot, one of the people on the convention floor, just point of order. You know, he was appointed by her. So, you know, she was very much like owes her leadership position to that crowd. It was evident to me that she was a little fed up. One really telling thing is when they were doing, if you haven't been to a convention, what happens is the delegates vote, and then all the district chairs go up to the microphone, and district by district, they read out, you know, District 2 vote, you know, 5 votes Becker, or 3 votes Fedorchak, or whatever the competition is, right? So they're going through that roll, and while they were doing the House one, you know, everybody was spoiling their ballots, and a lot of the pro-Becker district chairs were like, and 23 ballots spoiled for Dr. Rick Becker. And she tried to tell him from the stage, don't do that. Like, that, you know, he is not a part of, by our rules, he is not a part of this process. Don't say that. And then they all said it even more emphatically. So in some ways, I feel like Sanford kind of got a come to Jesus moment this weekend.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, maybe she has a better understanding now of these folks, but I think that a lot of our elected Republicans, normies, who are very, very frustrated by this process, need to look a little bit in the rearview mirror about the role they played in terms of embracing this populist crowd for their own electoral gains and that kind of thing. These folks didn't just create themselves, right? And I think I've talked about it on this thing before, being at the Republican convention in 2018 and seeing sort of traditional Republicans hanging out with people who I'm like, oh my God, don't be talking with those. Like, what? I thought you were a normal person and you're talking to these conspiracy theorists.
Senator Kevin Cramer, who voted to certify the 2020 election, who I think has been refreshingly outspoken and pushing back on some of the lies that January 6th was just tourists going through the Capitol. He's pushed back on that. He's called that a lie and everything. One of the people that gave, because Cramer received the convention endorsement even though he's running unopposed, but they go through the rigmarole. Yeah. One of the people that gave his endorsing speeches was former state representative Dan Johnston, who's also a district chair of District 24, yeah. He gave one of Cramer's endorsing speeches. Dan Johnston was at January 6th. There's pictures of him. I've published it. Like, he's there. And he was alongside, by the way, a guy, I mean, standing with him was a guy who has been arrested and I believe convicted, I'm not sure, for charges for entering the Capitol. Now, I have no evidence at all that Daniel Johnson entered the Capitol. All I know is that he was there. But, I mean, to me, that's remarkable. Like, why, Senator Cramer, why are you elevating somebody like that?
Of all the people you could have give your speeches.
Right. Ed Schaefer would have given your seconding speech, right? I mean, Lots of people would have given it. And, you know, that's who he chose. And I think that was a reason. I think there's a reason behind that, because they don't want any trouble. And that is one of the confounding things, because I think you absolutely have a good point when you say that there are Republicans that need to look in the rearview mirror about some of the doors that are open on this. But on the flip side of that, is the question of how much this is like bottom up. You know, it's not like you know, there are a lot of, like, I don't think has Doug Burgum embraced some of this? Yes. Did Doug Burgum steer the ship in this direction? No.
But Rob, I think one of my frustrations is I don't believe a lot of the people at the top believe this crap.
No, they don't.
And for political expediency, or, it could be worse if these other guys get in, we found ourselves in this position. And so I think at some point you can't continue embracing it or repeating the stuff that's happening, or having Dan Johnston do your nomination speech and then be shocked that they've taken over the convention and they endorse a 10 Commandments, get public money out of public schools candidate for DPI, and embrace the idea that public schools are evil. You can't just say, "Oh, that's some other Republican Party." I can't believe those people are doing this stuff as you're at the same events, funding their campaigns.
And again, I want to, like, when I'm trying to draw lines between all these different factions, that's just me trying to relate to you what's going on. I'm not making excuses for any of this.
No, I understand, but I think that we don't do enough as a society to sort of think about how did we get in this position, right? I mean, I've been getting a lot of heat from some of my progressive friends when I'm saying there's a difference, right? There's a difference, but they're saying they support Trump. When we talk about democracy and what's going to happen to our country, it's a full stop. You support Trump?
Yeah.
You're not a serious person. And maybe that's not fair, but I mean, if we're really talking about the future of the country's on the line here, we can't half-ass it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I wish that Democrats were more invested in giving Republicans who are fed up a place to go.
I'm going to go back to Denver Riggleman's speech, and I can't wait for it to be online to show it to you, because, I mean, he basically made the case, all right, Democrats are welcoming a Republican member of Congress, a former Republican member of Congress.
Yeah.
What would happen if a former Democrat member of Congress, who wasn't Tulsi Gabbard, I suppose, walked into the Republican convention right now?
Yeah.
Like, there is more of an openness.
I can remember it happening on the national stage. I mean, Joe Lieberman was an example who was very much embraced by Republicans at the end of his Senate career. Zell Miller, former,
Rob, that was a different Republican Party than we're seeing today.
Well, right. No, absolutely true. I'm not, I wasn't doing tit for tat. I was just saying it's not unprecedented.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I think of somebody like, if you're in the oil industry and you're thinking, I mean, because let's be honest. I mean, the way it stinks, and it's a product of Congress's dysfunction. But from president to president, we have wildly different approaches to regulating things like that. And I can understand why, if you make your living in the oil industry, whether you're a roughneck out on the oil rig to an oil industry executive, why you might want to hold your nose and vote for Donald Trump because you're afraid of what you're going to get out of the Biden administration. I can understand that calculation. For me, I can't make that calculation. I mean, it's hard because you're asking people to basically play with their livelihoods, and that's hard. But I mean, for me, I look at Donald Trump, and he's standing up on stage and he's calling the January 6th people unbelievable patriots. And something like that is like, nope, red line. That's it. But also, I don't work in the oil and gas industry that could basically be shut off by a second. And not that Biden's done that, but you know what I mean? I
understand, but I just do want to do a point of clarification. We're pumping more oil in this country under the Biden administration than we were under the Trump administration. Yeah. So this idea that, I understand regulation is changing and all that kind of stuff, but this isn't like we're going to stop using oil. But
then let's talk about the coal industry and some of these new EPA things that just came out. I wish Democrats did more because I think there are a lot of Republicans who come over. Now, I also understand the Democrats would lose numbers on their left flank, maybe, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about the United States, right? I mean, a Democrat in North Dakota, I don't know any Democrats in North Dakota. It's not true. The vast majority of elected Democrats I know embrace coal. We know the jobs and the good union jobs that go along with the coal industry. That doesn't fly on the East and West coasts in terms of the Democrat message. But Democrats do need to get better on energy across the board. But again, to the point of, you've got somebody who you disagree on energy policy versus somebody who tried to lead an insurrection, right? I mean, it's I have a little bit of breaking news here too, by the way, from the convention. So one of the last votes they held was on the resolutions, but we didn't get those results that day. Basically, everybody voted and then went home. The NDGOP, as we were talking, just got a press release from Executive Director Andrew Nijhuis.
14 of 15 resolutions passed with resounding result. The abortion resolution failed. That was the one where they were calling for, mothers to be put in jail. There was also some language in there that was, could definitely be perceived as taking aim at IVF, in vitro fertilization. You saw several pro-life organizations and State Senator Yana Murdahl, who is, probably the most prominent pro-life activist in North Dakota, come out against that resolution. So, anyway,
yeah,
but the thing is, the coal industry opposed one that was about carbon. That one passed.
Yeah, and I would say good for them on the abortion thing. But I would also point out that Julie Fedorchak, shortly before the convention, came out for a national abortion ban after I've been hearing from Republicans, including Doug Burgum and Kelly Armstrong, that, this is about states' rights. And Roe is wonderful because it gives the option back to the states. And then we have the, Julie Fedorchak calling for a national abortion ban. I mean, do you trust states or do you not? I think
that's frustrating to me.
And
I think that's a diversion. And the thing is, even Donald Trump now has come out against a national ban. I think that was just today. Although his statements are always all over the map. But I mean, yeah. I think that was a mistake by Fedorchak. But I think obviously she's feeling threatened from her right flank right now. And,
But I mean, when you start talking about, can people vote for a candidate? I mean, to me, I really like Julie Fedorchak. I can't vote for a candidate who supports a national abortion ban. I mean, I just could never do it. And I think there's others as well. And I think it frankly opens up. I mean, the other breaking news we had this morning is the potential of Cara Mund jumping into this race.
Is it Cara?
Are we sure? I thought
you got all over me last year, and this morning I left her a voicemail and I called her Cara, and then I hung up and I was like, "Oh my God, she's gonna think I'm doing it on purpose." I think it's Cara. I think it's Cara.
Okay, I got all over you, and now I'm in my own head about it.
I think it's Cara.
Moral of the story,
Cara, if you're listening, we are not doing this on purpose. I swear to God, we're just idiots.
Yes. But I think it gives an opening to her candidacy, right? I mean, you'd be another female in the race. Now you've got a position that isn't as extreme on abortion compared to Fedorchak. I mean, I think if she were to decide to get in, and I'm dubious still about this report of her jumping in. Like you said, the filing deadline's at 4:00 today. Yeah. She has to get 300 signatures.
There's nothing to say that she doesn't have those banked, because to get those signatures, you don't have to have like a petition approved by the Secretary of State. You can download it off the internet. She could have them and is just deciding whether or not she wants to go down to the office and file them.
Yeah, that very well could be true, but I hadn't heard anything about her collecting signatures or anything like that. So if she gets into this, you and I have spoke via text message this morning, and you said in your column, how does this play out?
I don't know. I don't know. I want to think
from Julie.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, you would expect a big Democratic. She's, whether you like it or not, she's very popular with Democrats. And I think if she draws, I mean, the first thing everybody's thinking about is crossover votes. But if people are crossing over for Cara Mund, they're going to vote for Cara Mund. And that changes the pie, right? Like it changes the percentage you need to get to be the top vote getter. But it doesn't do anything.
Changes the denominator.
It changes the denominator. That's right. That's right. That was the term I was looking for. But the thing is I think the real question is whether or not it hurts Fedorchak, who I think is the obvious one. I don't think like Becker supporters are gonna be interested, or Alex Balazs supporters are gonna be interested in Cara Mund. So are there moderate Republicans who could be drawn over to Mund? And that I don't know.
Yeah, and you wrote about this in your column. And how does it affect the governor's race? If all of a sudden you have 10,000 Democrats voting in a primary where there's only 115,000 voters, does that make a difference? And who do they vote for? Like in 2016, it was pretty obvious. Burgum was the guy who people saw as being sort of pro-choice and pro-LGBT. Turns out that wasn't true.
Yeah, he's ultra-Tumpy. So I'm wondering if you have all those Democrats who are crossing, if they punish Tammy for feeling burned by Burgum. I mean, at least, maybe they're looking and they're saying, well, at least Armstrong's a known quantity.
Right. And I think like with Wayne back in 2016, Democrats didn't like him just because he's a Republican and has been there long, but he was very, very moderate for a Republican in North Dakota.
Right.
And maybe it's a wash. Maybe it's not like it was in 2016 where 90% are voting for one or the other. Maybe it is a wash, but I think it's interesting. And does it change the Trumpy TV commercials that we're seeing from the two governors candidates, assuming there might be a little more progressive electorate in the primary than originally expected?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know how to handicap that race right now. I'm going to be very interested. Somebody's going to pull it. I mean, they're going to have to and include her. Well, maybe they won't pull. I mean, if I were them, I'd wait to go in the field till 4 and find out if she's actually in this thing. Now, I want to say, based on my report, was based on Joel Heitkamp. And he said declaratively on social media that she is joining the House primary for Congress. So...
Yeah,
I mean, and he was obviously very in with her campaign last cycle, and I think that hurts her I think that hurt her when she was trying to run as an independent, and she's right. I mean, Democrats are holding fundraisers for her. Joel Heitkamp's promoting her campaign. It's hard, and I think even now she runs as a Republican. Like it's kind of cute. Like I don't think it's too cute because I think she has a hard time saying, I'm Joel Heitkamp's favorite Republican in this race, right? I mean,
she'll have to figure out a way to articulate why she's a Republican.
She's not going to win that primary by being a pro-choice Republican.
Yeah,
she may peel some votes away from Fedorchak, I would think, maybe primarily, but she's not going to win.
And I was, before we jumped on, I was reminded that Julie Fedorchak was one of the main folks that went after Cara Mund when Cara went after the GOP for not supporting women. Right. And, Julie was a signer on the letter. And I don't know if there's hard feelings about that still. Plus, again, this national abortion ban might motivate her to get in this race. I hope the motivation wouldn't be just to hurt Julie Fedorchak, but you mentioned that Becker was on talk radio this morning. I mean, basically cheering on this development,
talking like she's saying he's going to do polling, to account for her being in the race. And by the way, he claims he's now raised $820,000. We still haven't seen the financial the deadline just passed. April for the quarterlies was March 31st. They have by April 15th to file them. So in the next week, we're going to be seeing all the campaigns file disclosures, and we'll get a better look at that. We
don't know if it's a loan. I
never trust the campaigns until you see the report. That's what you go by. But not that he's lying about the dollar amount, but its provenance is what I'm concerned with. But I don't know. I don't think she can win. Well, first of all, if she gets in the primary, she can't run in the general. But she does, if she misses today's deadline, she does have until September 3rd to file 1,000 signatures to run in the general. My other knock on her running, by the way, if you have these aspirations and you want to run, then will you please run a traditional campaign and give people the proper amount of time? Because even now, she gets in this race now. Early voting in the June primary starts in 2 weeks?
Right.
So you're giving people who are going to vote early a 2-week window to look? I mean...
Well, I want everybody to run that wants to run, and I think that she's an interesting candidate. I think that these unique places she's going... The other difference here is if she decides to run as an independent, I don't know that... I think there's still some hard feelings from 2 years ago on the Democrat side about that. And Trygve Hammer is not Mark Haugen, right? I don't think Trygve's going to back down. Mark was sort of pushed out of this race. I don't think Trygve's going to put up with that crap if somebody tries to do that this time.
Nor should he, by the way.
No, right on.
I mean, how much time and money has he invested running already? And we've talked about it. Both he and Katrina have come out. They have... I'm not saying this to be dismissive of their previous effort, but I would say, I think they would maybe both admit, I think Katrina did during our interview. Yeah. They're better organized this time. They have more experience this time. They're working their butts off. And if the party comes along and tries to pressure one of them out again in favor of Mund, and if Mund on the ballot, I don't think Mund can win on a ballot as an independent against a Republican, period. And I think she especially can't win if she's up against a Republican and a Democrat on the ballot.
Yeah. Well, I will say, just going back to Trygve and Katrina really quick, I mentioned that the Dem convention this year was different than it was 2 years ago. And part of it was Katrina and Trygve were candidates. They had staff with them. They were doing media interviews. Their
messaging from afar, I've noted their messaging is more polished. It's more on point.
They're raising money at the convention. It's like, these weren't two people who just jumped in. They got their stuff together this time. And like you said, learn from last time, but they're both impressive candidates. And, in a really, really tough environment. So I don't know. Again, going back to us trying to handicap if Mund gets into this race and what this means for this race or the governor's race. Let's talk about it the day after the primary.
I did get a text message from the Secretary of State, Michael Howe. He says that Mund hasn't stopped by or made any contact with anyone in his office. We're recording this. It's 12:45 p.m. April 8th. So she has till 4 p.m. But he's saying, as of a few minutes ago, hasn't heard anything from her. And again, wouldn't have to. I mean, she can download. All you got to do
is print off the forms, right, and you can collect signatures.
So that's nothing, but nothing so far. I guess we'll see. I have a feeling that she's not going to end up being in.
I don't know. I was shocked this morning to see the Hike camp. Again, we're pretty connected and often, but this happened 2 years ago too, where Cara got into the race and was like, where's this coming from? And so she keeps her counsel close to the vest. And I was surprised. And I'm a fan. I will be honest. I'm a fan of Cara Mund.
Yeah.
Cara, damn it. Cara.
It's Cara, I think. It's Cara.
I think it's Cara.
You're killing me. Because I wanted to be so careful about it. And I thought you were going to be happy with me for getting it right, because you jumped all over me every time. And I think you thought I was doing it on purpose, and I was not.
I didn't. No, I never overestimate your intelligence, Rob.
You jerk.
You teed it up, man. You teed it up.
You are a jerk. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if she ends up on the ballot, the math on that is going to be interesting, and I hope we see polling to tell us where that. I'm not going to know. I mean, I don't want to say anything declarative until I see some real polling on that, because I just don't know what that does.
So, Rob, we didn't talk at all about lieutenant governor candidates.
Yeah.
Speaking of secrets.
Yeah.
Kelly Armstrong, the most obvious choice that was a good kept secret.
I would say by Saturday morning, I was about 99% that I knew. And I was texting Kelly saying, is it Michelle Strindon? And he uncharacteristically was not texting me back.
Yeah.
Now that wasn't enough for me to run a story on it, but I was like, okay,
So what made you think that it was her?
I had heard from somebody that it was a Fargo lawmaker, and then from there, I kind of just did the math on who was most likely, and she was the name I came up with.
Yeah, because who else would? I mean, Shannon Roars, Judy Lee.
She's leaving. Yeah. No, just unlikely. So, So anyway, I by the way, I think she's a very strong pick for him. Background in public education, socially conservative.
She's smart. She's smart. Thoughtful. She digs in.
She checks the geographic box. She's from Fargo. She's from Fargo and Grand Forks, really. I mean, the Strindon family. That she's Earl Strindon. Was her father-in-law. Was her father-in-law. He's passed away, obviously.
And she has a kid who plays hockey at UND. Can you beat that?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a good pick. I think that's a very strong pick. I guess we didn't talk at all about Tammy Miller picking Josh Teagan, which was less. When I wrote about Kelly's pick, I said he went conventional, and I think that's right. Like he picked somebody. He's male. She's female. He's from the West. She's from the East. She's got a pretty famous, high profile political family name. Her son, I mean, it's just, and by the way, very good lawmaker, very accomplished, she just checks all the boxes. Miller's was unconventional because Teagan doesn't really check a lot of those boxes. That's not me saying he's incompetent or anything, but I would argue probably not very well known outside of business circles. and really, I don't know, brings a constituency. The one thing I was thinking about that is, and though well, in fact, I mean, the Miller campaign doesn't like to admit this, but their candidate is not comfortable in working a room. I don't think that's her strong suit. I mean, I think she does it. I think she's probably fine. It's not her strong suit. Mr. Teigen is a salesman. He's very good at that. And I'm wondering, he does fill that hole for her.
Yeah. I mean, also there's a generational sort of thing here, balance as well. He's relatively young. I think it's strange that you basically have two people from the Burgum administration. I don't know how you appeal to many people outside of the Burgum inner circle by just having people from the Burgum inner circle.
Well, and it was a departure from the way, I mean, I've been kind of accusing Miller of running a copy and paste campaign of 2016, which is why when I heard it was Scott, it was maybe her lieutenant governor pick was maybe going to be Scott Decker, who's the mayor of Dickinson. I was thinking, well, sure, that makes sense. Doug Burgum picked Brent Sanford, who is the mayor of Watford City, and definitely wasn't in Burgum's circle. In fact, I was able to get my hand on text messages where, before he was picked as lieutenant governor, Sanford was kind of dismissing Burgum as just another Fargo liberal, and then ended up on the ticket. So, Burgum went west and went way outside his circle to bring Sanford on, and I would argue was a very successful pick. Brent Sanford, has a lot of, is well respected, has a lot of connections. I don't know that Teigen checks those same. I don't want to say that he's not respected, but he just not as well known, doesn't have the same sort of connections as Sanford does.
It is an interesting contrast because you have Tammy who, like you said, maybe isn't as comfortable working a room, but she's very, very thoughtful. She's very deep. She's, and I don't know that he's that. I mean, he's sort of, like you said, salesman, and I don't know if he's like a deep policy thinker or whatever. So that's another, he hasn't been in state government for that long. I guess I know nothing about him other than he's the commerce commissioner.
But
Has he been in economic development his whole life, or?
I mean, some of the stuff and some of the, but that also means he was a lot of the stuff bringing like Kevin O'Leary to the state, and that is Josh Teigen. And I'm not sure that helps with the sort of voters that Tammy Miller is trying to appeal to.
Yeah, you can't appeal to that Bosniak caucus sort of group by bragging about corporate welfare.
Right. It's I'm Tammy Miller on the prairie with my shotgun holding off stooges, and I'm the most loyal Trump supporter you've ever seen. And to be fair, Armstrong's doing some of that Trump loyalty stuff too. Are doing a lot of it, but
yeah,
Teigen doesn't match up with that campaign rhetoric, but also campaigns, they have to appeal to a lot of different voters. So
again, I don't know, where's he from? Is he from Fargo?
Yeah, he worked with Burgum. He came up kind of through Burgum's businesses.
Okay,
and so he's definitely a Burgum world person.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I know nothing about him beyond that he was commerce.
Yeah. So interesting pick. I'd say it's the wrong pick. Who knows? We'll see. Who
knows?
We'll see.
And Rob, if we're being honest, how many people are voting for the lieutenant governor?
Not very many. I think the lieutenant governor. I think they can help. But I think the bigger chance is you want somebody who's not going to hurt you.
Right.
Right.
Do no harm.
Right. They're kind of like the umpire. Like if they're doing their job right, nobody's really talking about them.
Right.
So, I think we covered it. We did a whole hour on everything that happened at the convention and all that. I'm trying to think of anything else. The resolutions came out. They all passed except for the abortion one. But there were some other not so great resolutions in there. I'm sure we'll have a report on Inforum about that. But anything else? I don't know. I'm looking ahead. Like, I don't know. My larger thing, delegate count way down in 2024, down by about 40%, which I think was interesting. But, I don't know. I do think there is going to come a time where I think Republicans really have the benefit of inertia right now, where there's a lot of North Dakotans who are used to voting R for 30 years, going back to when Ed Schaefer kind of kicked things off when he was elected governor in 1992. And I think they have that inertia. They have that wind in their sails. But I'm wondering increasingly as people see more and more of the stuff happening at the convention, they see a lot of the infighting going on. If some voters don't start to realize this isn't really the party of John Hoeven anymore, you know.
Don't you think some of that fall off was because 2 years ago the convention was a bit of a long drawn out sort of, like, there's probably a chunk of people are like, I'm not going through that again, and then they're reading reports that the first 3 hours or 4 hours are going to be about seating.
And it wasn't centralized this year, right? Last year it was in Bismarck, which is
but you had delegate counts in some of the Grand Forks districts, Rob, that were like 10, 11 delegates for the GOP. That was surprising. District 42 and 43, as those counts were coming through.
Some Fargo area districts too were lower, a lot lower than I would have expected. So you're right. I think there's an increasing sense that the convention process is kind of a sandbox where the populist faction of the party plays. But I think it's dangerous for the normies or the traditionals to look at that and just say, we'll just let them play in there. If that's the decision that they're making, saying we're just going to let them play in that sandbox, I mean, that's dangerous because now you end up with, who's representing the state party at the national level. You see a candidate like a Julie Fedorchak, who should in any other political time is an ideal candidate for Congress, checks so many boxes. She emerges from the campaign wounded. For what reason?
Well, and if you're Kirsten Basler, you've got to be thinking about the fact that it was a strategic blunder to go to this convention. She didn't gain anything by going there. Of course, she dug in and sort of defended her record. That's good, but what came out of this is not good for her.
In her opening speech to delegates, Chair Sandy Sanford, gave this speech, and it was like, first of all, I felt like she was kind of talking to me because she was like, they said the candidates wouldn't come. Well, they're all here. They said delegates wouldn't show up. Well, there's 1,600 delegates in this room. 25 minutes later, they had the credentialing report. It was like 1,400, but whatever. But like she was going through all this stuff, and I just like really making the case. This convention matters. All these naysayers, they don't matter. But I don't know. Like if you're Kirsten Basler, if you're Julie Fedorchak, if you're somebody that you came there and you got burned, why would you keep showing up?
Yeah. So if Tammy Miller went to the convention, she would have gotten just absolutely smoked at that convention, right? I mean,
right.
I think
that's why she didn't go. I mean, if she really thought she could have made it close, I think she would have
got some momentum.
But I think there's a real probability that the Bastiats who kind of look, I think a lot of them, you look at what they're writing on more on social media and that, I think they think a lot of this stuff Burgum's doing with Trump right now is he's a poser and he's just there for his own purposes, which frankly I kind of think is true. I think she would have had a really tough time. And I think that's hard. Like I mean, Tammy Miller's a strong candidate for public office. Julie Fedorchak's a strong candidate for public office. Kirsten Basler, although she runs for a nonpartisan office, is a strong candidate for public office. Having these people come to conventions and get burned, you're burning good candidates. Why?
Yeah, and I will point out again, and I know people don't like identity politics, but those three candidates you just referenced all have something in common.
They're all women. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time with that. I mean, Lori Hines is, she had no problems being elected national committee.
Committee woman. They have to appoint a woman to that position, that's Rob.
I guess that is true.
Yeah. But I think it's something to think about, right? I mean, when I saw the Basler numbers come through, I read that as this is not a good sign for Fedorchak. And again, Julie outperformed Gettle and Kirsten in this crowd. I don't know how that would have worked if Becker was actually in it, but kudos to them for showing up and digging in and taking it, because I assume Julie knew it was not going to be a fun weekend, even if she won it.
I think the party's got some things to figure out about this process. I mean, they can't have a convention where you're spending the first 3.5 hours fighting over credentials. Something's got to give. And I think Republican candidates need to feel like their party is running a fair process, and I think a lot of them have good reason not to feel that way right now.
Right.
We're going to end it there. Thank you for listening. As always, like I said, Wednesday is Chad's not going to be on. Ben's going to be sitting in, Ben Hansen. We're going to be talking with Alex Balazs. That'll be very interesting. And we'll know by then whether or not we have a fourth House candidate. So thank you, as always, for listening, and we'll talk again. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.